Welcome back to the deep dive. I have to say, today feels a little different. Usually we grab a topic, shake it out, and see what falls onto the floor. But today we're starting something that I'm genuinely thrilled about. We are kicking off a brand new series within the show called Reading CA, that's SEA, Reading Southeast Asia.
It is fantastic to finally be doing this. There is so much depth in the scholarship coming out of the region that just, it never makes it to the popular bookshelves in the West. And I think we're going to uncover some real gems here.
Absolutely. And I want to take a second to speak directly to a specific slice of our listeners. If you're a student right now, maybe you're in a university library somewhere, staring at a stack of monographs about Indonesian social history, or if you're an academic prepping for a lecture on the fall of the New Order, this is for you. We really want this episode to be the companion piece that sits right next to those standard history textbooks.
Which is, that's a tall order, because the standard history of this particular period is, well, it's dense. It's usually a list of generals, economic indicators, currency devaluation rates, political maneuvering.
Right, it's the view from the presidential palace.
Right.
But we're going to try to find the view from the street corner, because the days we're talking about today, May 1998 in Indonesia, are heavy. It's been over 2 decades since the Suharto regime collapsed. If you go to Jakarta today, you see glitzy malls, you see a vibrant democracy, you see the traffic.
Always the traffic.
Always the traffic. But underneath that, there's this silence. It's like a noise-canceling headphone has been put over a specific week in history.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
It really is. It's a loud silence. It's a silence that takes effort to maintain.
And that's our hook. We're doing a deep dive into a paper published in 2022 by Yuniki Mutiara Himawan, Annie Pullman, and Winifred Lui. It's titled Revisiting the May 1998 Riots in Indonesia, Civilians and Their Untold Memories.
And this piece is so crucial because it stops looking at the who of the politics, who gave the order, who benefited, and it looks at the how of the experience. How did regular people survive? How do they remember it?
Yeah.
The core tension here is between the official history, which is basically a blank page or a distorted scribble, and the lived memory, which is vivid, terrifying, and still very much alive.
We need to set the stakes before we get into the data. When we say May 1998 riots, for someone who might just know it as a footnote in Asian history, what are we actually talking about?
We are talking about a total systemic collapse. This was the violent climax that preceded the resignation of President Suharto, ending 32 years of authoritarian military rule.
32 years?
Yeah. But the cost was just astronomical. We're looking at an estimated 1,000 deaths, and some estimates go much, much higher in the span of about 48 to 72 hours.
Just 2 or 3 days?
Yes. And it wasn't just clashes. It was mass violence directed specifically against ethnic Chinese Indonesians. We're talking about the looting of thousands of buildings, arson that burned people alive in malls, and perhaps the most horrific aspect, state-sanctioned, or at least organized sexual violence against women.
And the kicker, which the authors point out right away, is that there has been no official redress.
None. Absolutely none. No criminal investigation has ever led to the prosecution of the masterminds.
Yeah.
There have been fact-finding teams, sure, but in terms of justice, zero. Nothing.
And that's where the psychological angle of this paper really hits you. The authors aren't just historians. They're looking at the psychology of memory. They're asking, how do you remember a trauma when the government tells you to move on?
Yeah.
How do you process a nightmare when the state refuses to admit it was real?
It creates this kind of cognitive dissonance, a break with reality. And that's what we're unpacking. We're going to look at the anonymous voices of 235 Indonesian civilians who participated in this study. And what's really unique is the mix. About 43% Chinese Indonesian and 57% pribumi, or indigenous Indonesian.
That mix is really rare, isn't it? Usually I feel like I read accounts that are very segregated.
Yeah.
You hear the Chinese victim narrative or you hear the pribumi bystander narrative, but they rarely sit in the same data set.
Exactly. It allows us to see where the memories overlap, because they do overlap in some really surprising ways, and where they completely diverge based on who was holding the target on their back.
Okay, let's unpack this properly. We can't understand the memory without understanding the moment. We need to go back to 1998, paint the picture for us. What did Indonesia feel like in, say, early May 1998?
You have to imagine a pot of water that has been boiling with the lid taped shut. The backdrop is the Asian financial crisis, the Krisman.
Krisman, okay.
The Indonesian rupiah had collapsed. It didn't just dip, it evaporated.
So we're talking about people's life savings becoming worthless overnight.
Precisely. Just
Sure.
gone. Inflation was spiraling. The price of rice, cooking oil, baby formula, the absolute basics was skyrocketing.
Wow.
People were losing their jobs by the thousands. There was this thick atmosphere of desperation. You walk out specifically to buy food, and you don't know if you can afford it from one day to the next.
And that economic panic then turns political.
Inevitably, it always does. The student movement began to coalesce. They were kind of the moral voice coming out of the campuses demanding reformasi.
Reform.
Yeah, reform. They wanted Suharto out. They wanted an end to the corruption, collusion, and nepotism, the KKN, as they called it.
But protests happen all the time. I mean, student protests are a part of political life.
Yeah.
Why did May 1998 go from protests to inferno?
The trigger was May 12th.
Yeah.
Students at Trisakti University in Jakarta were demonstrating. They wanted to march to the Parliament building.
Okay.
Security forces blocked them. It was a standoff.
Yeah.
And then the security forces opened fire with live ammunition.
Not tear gas, not rubber bullets.
Live rounds. 4 students were killed. Ilang, Hafidin, Hiri, and Hendriawan. Their names are iconic. When those 4 students died, something just snapped in the national psyche. They were seen as martyrs. Their funerals the next day were massive. And that grief, it morphed instantly into rage.
And that's when the shift happened. From May 13th to May 15th, Jakarta and other cities too, right? Solo, Medan.
Palembang, yeah. They descended into chaos.
Yeah.
But, and this is critical for the paper we're discussing, it wasn't just spontaneous rage. The study hints at, and history confirms, the presence of provocateurs.
What do you mean by that?
Unknown men, short haircuts looking like military, encouraging the looting, starting the fires. It felt coordinated. It was organized chaos.
So that's the reality of 1998. Now let's fast forward to 2020. The researchers want to ask people about this. You'd think, okay, it's been 22 years. People write memoirs about wars after 20 years. This should be easy.
You would think. But the methodology section of this paper reads like a thriller novel. They distributed an anonymous online survey via WhatsApp.
Okay, so it's private, it's encrypted.
It's supposedly safe. They targeted people over 30, so anyone who was at least 8 years old when the riots happened.
Yeah.
And the pushback they got was immediate and chilling.
Yeah, they detail some of the messages they received from potential participants. People weren't just saying, no thanks, I'm busy. They were saying things like, you should be careful.
Or, don't spread this around. This is a closed issue. My favorite one was, this is too frightening.
Too frightening.
Remember, this is an encrypted, anonymous survey. And people were still terrified that just clicking a link could get them in trouble.
What does that tell us about modern Indonesia? I mean, it's a democracy now.
It tells us that the new order might be gone, but the regime of silence is still in power. The authors use this term, and it's so potent. A regime of silence isn't just people being quiet because they're shy.
Right.
It's a structural silence. It's the result of impunity. If the people who burned down the malls are still sitting in parliament, or are influential businessmen, or are generals who were never touched, then you learn to keep your mouth shut.
It's self-preservation.
It's intergenerational trauma disguised as politeness. Let's not talk about the bad times. But really what that means is, let's not talk about the crimes that were never punished.
So the fact that they managed to get 235 detailed responses is actually a minor miracle.
It's a testament to the fact that people do want to speak. They just need a safe channel, a place where they feel they won't face repercussions.
So let's get into what they actually said. One of the first things that really struck me in the data was this theme of unpreparedness.
Yes.
Which is odd, right? You just told us the economy was tanking, students were marching, things were tense. But the respondents, time and time again, said they were shocked.
This is a really important distinction the paper makes. There's a difference between political unrest and societal collapse.
Oh, yeah.
Most people expected demonstrations. They expected chanting. They expected maybe some tear gas. They did not expect their neighbors to start burning down grocery stores.
It disrupts the mundane. That's the phrase that came to mind. The riots didn't happen on a battlefield. They happened in neighborhoods. They happened on your way to school.
Exactly.
And there's this one anecdote that I honestly haven't been able to get out of my head since I read it. It's a Chinese Indonesian woman who was in junior high school at the time.
The exam story.
It's the exam story. She's sitting in her classroom. It's exam week. And for anyone who knows Asian education systems, I mean, exams are high stakes. You focus, you study.
The world could literally be ending, but you finish that math problem.
Exactly. So she's bubbling in her answers on the sheet, and she starts hearing gunshots outside, not shouting, gunshots.
And notice the detail she provides. She doesn't talk about the politics. She talks about the teachers. She says the teachers started crying.
That is the moment the world breaks, isn't it? When the adults, the authority figures who are supposed to be in charge of the rules, break down.
It's the ultimate loss of safety. If the teacher is crying, who is going to protect me?
Right.
She describes her pribumi friends, her indigenous Indonesian classmates, having to escort her home because it wasn't safe for her to walk alone. In the span of an hour, she went from student taking a test to ethnic target requiring a bodyguard.
And that transition wasn't gradual, it was instant.
That's the trauma, the speed of it. 1 minute, everything's normal. The next, it's not.
There's another perspective from the survey, a pribumi respondent who is 9 years old, so he's just a kid. And he remembers the economic desperation vividly.
This is such crucial context. He remembers his father being laid off. He remembers the emptiness of the house. And then he remembers the looting.
And this is where it gets really complex. He describes seeing his neighbors looting shops. And he says they looked happy.
That word just jumps off the page. Happy.
It's disturbing, but he explains it. He says they felt free from rules.
We have to try and look at this through the psychology of the mob. When the social contract has failed you, when you can't feed your kids, when your money is worthless, when the government is corrupt, and suddenly the glass shatters and everyone is grabbing TVs and rice and shoes, there's a euphoric release.
A carnival of chaos.
It is a carnival of chaos. For a 9-year-old watching that, it must have been confusing and terrifying, but also weirdly electric.
It makes you realize that the riots weren't just one thing. For the victim inside the burning shop, it was a massacre. For the starving person outside, it might have felt like justice, or at least survival.
And that's why these memories are so murky, because the emotions conflict. Guilt, fear, exhilaration, horror, it's all mixed together in the same smoke.
But let's be very clear, and the paper is very clear about this. For one specific group, this was not a carnival, it was a hunt.
Yes. We need to talk about the targeted violence against Chinese Indonesians.
This wasn't random collateral damage.
No, not at all. The New Order regime had spent decades cultivating a very specific racism. They framed Chinese Indonesians as the economic animals, the people who controlled the wealth, who were in bed with the corrupt officials, but who weren't truly Indonesian.
The scapegoat.
They were the convenient scapegoat. So when the economy collapsed, the regime basically pointed a finger and said, it's their fault. Go get them.
The survey responses from the Chinese Indonesian participants are just. They're filled with this visceral terror. There's a young woman who describes her family's sleeping arrangement.
Sleeping with a knife.
For a month. A whole month.
Can you imagine the level of cortisol running through your body? Every night, you lock the doors, you turn off the lights, and you hold a weapon, waiting for the sound of breaking glass. That isn't living. That is surviving minute by minute.
She also mentioned the suitcases. They had suitcases packed in the car for 3 months, just in case they had to make a run for the airport.
It's the psychology of the refugee, but happening inside your own country, your own city. You're constantly calculating. How much time do I have? Which route do I take? Can we make it to Singapore? Can we make it to Australia?
And then there were the visual markers. The survey talks about how the city itself became a text of racism, signs on shops.
Milik Pribumi, owned by indigenous. Or Milik Muslim, Muslim owned.
It's almost medieval, like painting lamb's blood on the door so the angel of death passes over.
That is exactly what it was. It was a plea for mercy based on shared identity. Don't burn me, I am one of you. But by doing that, by putting up that sign, you're implicitly agreeing to the logic of the rioters.
What do you mean?
You're saying it is okay to burn the other shops, just not this one. It reinforces the divide even as it tries to survive it.
That divide seeped into everything. There's a story about a student returning to school after the riots cooled down, and this broke my heart. She walks into her classroom and she sees her pribumi friends wearing new clothes.
Looted clothes.
Yeah, and everyone knows where they came from, and she says they were joking about it. And one of the jokes, if you can even call it that, was that Chinese blood was halal.
Halal. Permitted. Permitted to be spilled.
Imagine hearing that from a kid you sat next to at lunch 2 weeks ago.
It just shows how quickly the dehumanization happened. It wasn't just the thugs on the street with machetes. It was the kids in the classroom absorbing that rhetoric.
Right.
The survey respondent talked about how the school broke into camps, the Pribumi camp, the neutral camp, and the Chinese camp. The schoolyard became a microcosm of the Civil War. That betrayal, the betrayal of friendship, often hurts longer than the physical fear.
Which brings us to the darkest part of this history, and I want to warn listeners, this is difficult to discuss, but we have to. We have to talk about the sexual violence.
We do.
Yeah.
And we have to talk about the silence surrounding it.
The paper notes that when they asked about this specifically, the answers became very generalized. People would say things like, women are treated badly, or there were rapes, but they pulled back from the details.
That's the taboo at work. You have to remember, immediately after May 1998, high-ranking government officials and military generals denied the mass rapes happened. They called it a fabrication, a hoax.
So the victims were gaslit on a national scale.
Completely. And you combine that with the deep cultural stigma of sexual violence in Indonesia, it meant that speaking out was almost impossible. You were shamed twice.
But the survey found something interesting. The victims might be silent, but the witnesses carry that memory like a heavy stone.
Witnessing is its own form of trauma. There's a specific anecdote from a Pribumi woman who was on a commuter train during the chaos.
Right, she talks about a newspaper boy.
He comes through the carriage shouting the headlines. And the headline is, Chinese girls raped, Chinese girls raped.
And she describes the reaction of the passengers, or I guess the lack of reaction.
The silence. She says everyone looked down. Everyone went quiet. It wasn't that they didn't care. It was that the horror was so immense and the shame so deep that there were no words. She talks about feeling this intense, burning anger at the mastermind behind it all. She felt helpless.
That helplessness seems to be a recurring theme. There was a Pribumi man who recalled seeing a young Chinese woman being attacked by men on motorbikes. He wanted to help, he tried to intervene, but he was outnumbered.
And that memory just haunts him, the moral injury of not being able to stop an atrocity. But we should also mention that some people did act. The survey highlights the Volunteer Team for Humanity and other NGOs.
Yeah, respondents mentioned family members who volunteered to help rape victims. One Chinese-Indonesian respondent recalled a foundation that was specifically helping victims who had become pregnant from the assaults.
This is such a critical piece of history. While the state was looking away, civil society doctors, priests, nuns, students, activists, they stepped into the breach. They created safe houses. They documented the injuries. The trauma rippled out to them, too. They absorbed the stories that no one else wanted to hear.
This leads us directly to what I think is the most surprising part of the paper. We have the victims, we have the perpetrators, and we have the bystanders. But the survey reveals a fourth group.
The helpers.
Allyship.
This is the novel finding the authors emphasize. The standard narrative of 1998 is a race war. It's us versus them. But the memories of the people on the ground are much more complicated. They are filled with moments of cross-ethnic solidarity.
There is this one story, the identity swap. It feels like a scene from a movie, but it happened. A Chinese-Indonesian woman and her family are trapped. They need to get through a checkpoint or a roadblock manned by rioters.
And their driver, a Pribumi man who worked for the family, he takes charge. He knows that if the mob sees their faces, they are dead. Or worse. So he comes up with a plan.
He disguises them.
He puts headscarves, jilbabs, on the women. But it's not just the clothes. This is the amazing part. He drills them. He makes them memorize Islamic verses.
Imagine the tension in that car. You're terrified, you're driving toward men with machetes, and you're reciting verses from a religion that isn't yours, praying that your accent doesn't give you away, praying the driver can talk fast enough.
It is an act of incredible, high-stakes improvisation. And let's give credit to the driver. He risked his life. If the mob found out he was smuggling Chinese employers, he would have been branded a traitor. He could have been killed right alongside them.
So why did he do it?
Because personal relationships often trump political hatred. These aren't Chinese economic animals. This is Ibu and Bapak, who I've driven for 5 years. Humanity breaks through the ideology.
There are other stories like this, neighborhoods setting up barricades?
Yes. We tend to think of the barricades as Chinese keeping the Pribumi out. But the survey shows mixed neighborhoods where Pribumi residents stood guard for their Chinese neighbors. They said, no, you aren't coming in here. These are our neighbors.
One Chinese man recalled Pribumi bus drivers helping him when his grandfather's shop was being looted. It just breaks the binary. It wasn't a total race war on every single street.
No. But, and we have to be careful not to romanticize this, there was another side to defense. It wasn't all peaceful solidarity. Some of it was armed, desperate self-defense.
This brings us to the story of the 11-year-old boy.
This anecdote stopped me cold.
He's 11, Chinese-Indonesian. And during the height of the riots, his parents hand him a rifle and a machete.
Just pause on that image for a second. An 11-year-old. He should be playing video games or kicking a soccer ball. Instead, he is standing at the front gate of his home, holding a weapon of war.
And the instruction was simple: kill or be killed.
That is a childhood-ending sentence. That's a sentence that rewires your brain.
And he says in the survey that it warped him. He talks about having difficulty accepting Pribumi Muslims later in life.
Of course. How could he not? In that formative moment, his brain wired itself to see the other as a mortal threat. He was programmed to kill his neighbors to survive.
Yeah.
You don't just get over that when the fires go out. That is a scar on the soul.
So here's the question. We have these incredible stories of the driver, the neighborhood guards, the child soldier. Why haven't we heard them before? Why is this novel?
Because they don't fit the script.
Whose script?
Anyone's script, really. For the state, stories of Pribumi helping Chinese undermine the narrative that the riots were just spontaneous mass anger.
Right.
If the people were helping each other, then who was driving the violence? It points back to the provocateurs. It points back to the army. So the state doesn't want those stories.
And for the Chinese community, why would they be silent about this?
Well, for the Chinese community, talking about armed self-defense, we had guns, we had machetes, is dangerous. It plays into the stereotype of the aggressive, powerful Chinese.
I see.
It's safer to be the passive victim in the history books. We were helpless. Please don't hurt us again. Admitting you were ready to kill to defend yourself. That complicates the good victim narrative. So those stories get buried in silence too.
It's fascinating how memory gets curated. We don't just remember, we remember what is safe to remember.
Precisely. We edit our own history for survival.
This brings us to the final analytical section of the paper, which deals with where these memories come from. And this part is a bit of a mind bender.
It really is. The researchers asked, what is your primary source of information about 1998? And the vast majority, even those who were in Jakarta at the time, said TV and mass media.
Which makes no sense on the surface. If I'm standing on my porch smelling the smoke, why do I say I know about it from the news?
It's a psychological defense mechanism. It's called distancing.
Explain that.
If I say, I saw a man get beaten to death, that memory is raw. It's mine. It's inside me. It's traumatic. If I say, I saw on TV that men were getting beaten, I'm an observer. I'm one step removed. I'm safe in my living room watching a screen.
So citing the media is a way to wrap the trauma in a protective layer.
Exactly. It creates plausible deniability. I wasn't involved. I was just watching. It allows people to talk about the event without reliving the sensory horror of it.
The expert in the paper links this to a theory by an academic named Niels Boubant. He talks about political murkiness.
Boubant's work on Indonesia is fantastic. He argues that during that transition period, the political atmosphere was defined by rumors. Who is the ninja? Who is the provocateur? Is it the CIA? Is it Prabowo? Is it Wiranto? Is it the Islamists?
A hall of mirrors. You can't find the truth.
A hyper-reality,
Yeah.
Boubant calls it. Fact and fiction blend together till you can't tell them apart. And Boubant argues that this murkiness is not accidental. It is a tool.
A tool for what?
For impunity. For
Okay.
getting away with it. If everything is confusing, if no one knows who really started it, then no one can be blamed. The murkiness protects the powerful. Oh, it was just chaos. Who knows what happened?
And that is why the survey is so radical.
Yes, because these memories cut through the murkiness. When a woman says, I was in the car and my driver recited the Quran to me to save my life, that isn't murky. That is crystal clear. When a man says, I saw the burning tire used as a roadblock, that is a fact. These individual granular memories are the antidote to the political fog. They anchor the history in reality.
So as we wrap this up, let's try to synthesize all of this. We've talked about the chaos, the targeting, the sexual violence, the unexpected allies, and the silence. What is the big takeaway here?
The takeaway is that the silence we talked about at the beginning, it isn't empty. It is full. It's full of horror, yes, but it's also full of humanity. It's full of these complex, contradictory memories.
The paper uses a term from the historian Thongchai Winichikul, unforgetting.
I love this concept, unforgetting. It describes a state where a society cannot speak openly about a tragedy because of fear, but they haven't forgotten it. They are holding it. They are carrying it.
It's like holding your breath.
That's a perfect way to put it. You haven't stopped breathing. You're just pausing. Indonesia has been holding its breath about 1998 for over 20 years. And this survey shows that the details are still there. They haven't faded. The smell, the sound, the fear, it is all accessible. It is just waiting for permission to be spoken.
And that brings us to the so what for our listeners, especially for the historians and students tuning in. Why does this matter now?
It matters because if you only read the government reports or the political histories, you're reading a fiction.
Mhm.
If you want to understand the soul of modern Indonesia, you have to look at these memories. You have to understand that the Reformasi era was born in blood, and that blood hasn't been washed away. It's just been covered up.
I want to leave everyone with a final thought. We talked about how silence is a survival strategy. It keeps you safe, it keeps you from getting arrested, it keeps you from having to explain to your kids why you have a machete in the attic.
It works for a time
Right.
until it doesn't.
Right. At what point does the silence stop protecting you and start poisoning you? If that boy, who's now a man in his 30s, never talks about the day he was handed a rifle, does that wound ever close?
I don't think it does. And I would ask the listener to consider how many other untold memories are trapped right now, not just in Indonesia, everywhere, all over the world, behind the fear of speaking out, waiting for a safe channel like an anonymous WhatsApp survey to finally surface.
That is a heavy thought, but a necessary one. We are going to leave it there for today.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for joining us for this premiere of Reading C. It was intense, it was long, but I hope it gave you a perspective you won't find in the textbooks.
It was a privilege to unpack these stories. They needed to be heard.
If you are an academic, take this as a challenge to look for the sources that aren't in the archives. Look for the whispers. And for everyone else, thank you for listening. We will be back with another deep dive soon. Take care of yourselves.